I'm Dr. Zac Cartun, and today I want to take you through a review of Spenco Cross trainers. These have been very popular, and I've been getting a lot of questions about how they perform, what they're good for, and what they're not. So let's take them out of the box. I'll give you my initial impressions, run them through our typical tests, and then I'll give an overall assessment of Spenco trainers, what they may be the best at preventing in terms of injury, what sports or activities they're best for, and what you might want to avoid. Alright, so right out of the box, my first impression is they look pretty cool. I like the design. That always counts for something. And they're very light, so also good. You don't want to have really heavy, clunky orthotics weighing down your shoes. Also, right off the bat, I always do a gravity test. So that is, I hold the insole by the end, and I like to see how much it bends down, how much it can support its own weight. And so far, pretty good. There's a little bit of a dip, indicating, hey, there's no like super strong rigid plastic or even metal in the middle to provide structural support, but the foam or rubber, which I'll get into, does a pretty good job holding up the orthotic. So let's talk about the material. You have this top cover, which is kind of a felt fabric piece that has this nice design. It's nice and smooth, but if I rub against it, I can feel it has some grip, some friction, which is always good. If you're doing any sort of activity, you don't want your sock to be slipping over the top of your insole. Then underneath this very thin layer of fabric, you have a piece of black foam. I don't know how well it comes through. I'll measure it in a bit, but it looks like to be 3 to 4 millimeters thick. This black foam runs across the entire length of the orthotic. Then finally, on the bottom, you have a third layer. In the front, that third layer is another piece of foam, kind of a different material, but also squishy. It looks to be about 1 millimeter thick. And then on the back, you have this kind of plastic rubber composite that goes through the back of the insole. Now, it does look like there's a separate material over the heel and some kind of different cushion, but this is just kind of a different coloring of this same yellow material. Overall, 3 materials, pretty standard for your over-the-counter insole. There's nothing obviously that's bad about the manufacturing of these. I always like to look to see how well the edges are cut, to see what the machining quality is like. It just gives you a sense of, hey, this company cares about their insole. They care about what you're going to be using to prevent pain or make you run better. So anyway, I'm happy to see that. The only kind of takeaway that I see on this insole is over the cushion area in the back of the heel, this black different color has a little bit of rubbing and wear around the edge of it. It's not like a perfectly smooth black. Again, in terms of function, this isn't going to do anything, but I like to look for attention to detail in the design of insoles. So let's start with my standard measurement, and that is the caliper to measure the thickness of the foam throughout and the different materials. So in the front, we have a thickness of 5.4 millimeters. Then in the heel, there's very little heel cushion, so I can actually just push it down. We get 12 millimeters. So in terms of drop, that's a 5 millimeter drop. In the sense, high heels have like a 3 or 4 inch drop. These have a 5 millimeter drop. That's very minor. That's basically 0 drop, and that's what we look for on an insole. We don't want your foot to be positioned downwards. That's going to cause undue stress on your metatarsal joints, the ball of your feet, which can cause pain, injury, and can be uncomfortable in the long term. So far, so good. In terms of arch support, let's look in the middle. Again, 12 at the heel cup and around 12 millimeters at the arch. Because there's no kind of separate, up and down, for lack of a better word, contour to the insole, the arch support is quite minimal. Already, I would say if you are flat-footed or you have very high arches, one or the other, either you need pretty good arch support. These may not be the best for you, but that's not what these insoles claim to be, and maybe that's where I should go next. What are these insoles claiming to be good for? They are cross trainers, so advanced impact absorbent cushioning for high impact sports. So far, I think that's a fair assessment. Then on the back, it has a profile thickness and a support type. So for profile thickness, it says medium. I'm not totally sure what that means. It doesn't give any detail about what profile thickness is. I suppose it means like how thick it is from the side. and that might give you a sense of how well it fits in your shoe. I would say for any standard sneaker, if you took out the insole that it comes with and you put this in, you won't notice any extra crowding because of the height of this insole. And then for support type, it says moderate as opposed to low and maximum. I am pretty surprised there's almost no support, and I assume they mean arch support, in this insole. So I would say this, from my experience, looks quite low, but maybe maximum is a lot higher. So anyway, just something to keep in mind as we continue to analyze these insoles. I also like to think about the hardness of this insole. If this is for maximum impact sports, you want an insole that's going to be able to stand up to repeated pressure, and kind of counterintuitively, you don't want an insole that's too soft, because that's going to absorb your push off when you're running or your change of direction, and it won't give you enough push back energy return to continue that change of motion or that running step forward. So let's see what our Shore durometer is telling us. And I always measure in the front of the insole. It's around 41 on the hardness scale, so that's quite soft actually. If I were to compare it to some other insoles, Tread Labs, Superfeet, they're in the 80 range. So this is about half as hard or twice as soft as those insoles. And it gives me a little bit of pause about energy return. So when it says this is perfect for impact, it is true, impact absorbing cushioning for high impact sports. That's true. It will absorb a lot of that impact, but it's not going to give you that return that you need if you're looking for kind of sports improvement. So already I'd say these are, as I narrow down who these insoles are for, it's for people with normal arches that are having some kind of injury where they need a lot of cushioning, but they're not looking to necessarily maximize their sports performance. These aren't going to improve your performance. They may make you feel more comfortable, which is enough for a lot of people. All right, so continuing onward, I also want to talk about the very minimal heel cup that's here. The heel cup here is around, I can measure it, I won't be lazy. It's around 7 millimeters, which would be okay to prevent any kind of lateral motion of the ankle. The only problem is when you push down with your fingers, you can totally flatten the heel cup. That means it's more of a, it's more for show than causing any kind of, or protecting your ankle and how it's moving around and shifting in your foot. So it's not going to be particularly good for people that have things like Achilles tendonitis or other ankle injuries, tears of the different tendons in the ankles. These aren't going to provide additional support there, but the fact that there is a tiny bit of a lip may be helpful for certain sports, just to reposition the foot after doing any kind of big motion. I also like to, test out the energy return of these insoles. I have a 2-pound ball here, and I like to see how much the ball bounces up. So for some insoles, the ball will not bounce at all. It'll land dead flat. Other ones bounce up pretty significantly, and it gives you a sense of the energy return of these insoles. So let's take a look. I'm going to drop it from a foot. So it barely bounced. You saw that it did a couple little things here. Maybe it got an inch off. I like to see anywhere from 4 to 5 inches for an insole that's really going to maximize energy return. So again, we're talking about impact absorption, but not performance improvement. Let me put this down. Next, let's do a little bit more about the structural integrity and how these insoles hold up to torsion and bending. So first, on the lateral bend test, you can see with very minimal pressure in my foot, I can bend it completely in half. Same thing along the horizontal. It pretty easily bends in half with minimal pressure on my part. And that's telling me that, hey, these insoles, again, are not for support. They're for cushioning and impact support. Same thing with torsion. It's quite easy to bend the insoles this way and that. You're not going to be getting a lot of foot support, a lot of mobility limitation from these insoles. Good for some things, bad for others. All right. Is there anything else? Finally, I want to talk a little bit about the stain resistance of these insoles and how breathable they are, because both of these things can matter in the long term. Stain resistance matters because you don't want your insoles to look gross after wearing them, while doing sports. Your foot is sweating. You don't want to see any kind of weird stains. I'm pretty confident based on this material you're not going to get that, and I did a couple online searches to see what these things look like after a couple years of use. About the same. I do see some kind of rolling up and fraying of the top layer over time. That's expected. So overall, good there. In terms of moisture wicking and breathability, these are actually also not bad. There's no layer in here that's totally impermeable except this yellow part in the back. Now, that would be a problem, except moisture and air has the ability to escape both the bottom, the top, and horizontally throughout this insole. That tells me that, hey, if you're doing a lot of running, trail running, sort of court sports where you're going to be sweating and moving a lot, these are going to do a good job of not building up that moisture and basically being safe for your foot, not going to harbor additional bacteria than it has to. So let's do a final summation of my initial thoughts, and then I'll talk about what these insoles are really made for. Overall, these seem to be a fine premium over-the-counter insole, meaning these are on the expensive side, around $50, and you are getting what you pay for. They're made well. They do have this nice foam that is going to be very cushioning, but they don't have anything that makes me go, wow. There's no material that's providing true structural support, like a carbon fiber base or even really rigid plastic that could hold your arch up for people that have flat feet or high arches. Additionally, there's not a lot of energy return when I'm considering, bouncing a ball and seeing how high it jumps up. That means that if you're trying to look for performance optimization, these are not your insoles. There's other ones out there that will do it. I would not recommend Spenco's. However, this is very good for energy absorption without needing that energy return impact. So what does that mean? That means that if you're suffering from point injuries on your feet, maybe you have a bruise on your big toe, maybe your heel is very sore, all of those kind of point spot injuries throughout your foot, these will do a very good job of cushioning them when you're doing that high impact activity, like it says on the box, and it is going to prevent the pain. So if those injuries are acute, meaning they happened somewhat recently, and you're looking just for something that will be a band-aid to them as your foot naturally heals, these are really good. I hate to call these just a band-aid, but in fact, that's what they really are going to do. They could also prevent some injuries along these lines. If you got injured wearing shoes that didn't have enough sole or insole, it's possible these could add that extra X factor that will prevent the future injury going forward. However, typically it's the sole themselves, that thick piece of rubber, that's going to prevent impact injuries going forward. This kind of just acts as a nice little bonus while you're trying to heal, but not, you don't want to give up doing activity altogether. That said, I would not recommend these insoles for some of the classic foot pain syndromes. So that includes metatarsalgia, where you have real inflammation in the ball of your feet. That includes plantar fasciitis, where the fascia, this band of tissue that runs along the bottom of your foot, that gets inflamed and pulls at the heel. This isn't going to really help for that. And if you have pain or discomfort from flat feet or high arches, these probably aren't the right insoles for you. So if I were to give it an overall score, in terms of honesty of what's on this box, I'd say, it's pretty reasonable what it says. So I'll give it a 7.5 out of 10 for that. In terms of, utility for people and why they typically use insoles, these are kind of on the lower end. I'd say 3.5, 4 out of 10. I like the way they look. That counts for a lot. So I'll leave you with that. And of course, if you have any questions, please comment below and I'll be happy to respond. Thank you.